The bridge of the sail of Dawnward Tide smelled of burned wiring and frightened breath. Captain Veshara Talkarine had not slept in 4 cycles, and her crest feathers had begun to molt in patches along her temple, a stress response her physician had warned her about back when there had still been a physician aboard. She watched the tactical display, where the last threads of her people hung in glowing constellations, 42 civilian transports, 6 damaged warships, and a single repair tender already venting plasma from a wound it would not survive. Behind them, a wider, brighter shape spread across the chart like ink soaking into cloth. Warlord Sarentek's fleet, the Vordek Coalition's favorite butcher. Captain, her first officer, Tavin, kept his voice low so the bridge crew would not hear it shake. He has closed to long-range firing distance, estimated engagement in 2 units. He won't fire. Veshara did not turn from the display. He wants live cargo. The auction houses pay better for breathing inventory. Then we have perhaps half a cycle before boarding. Veshara closed her upper eyes and kept her lower ones on the chart. 6 months of fleeing, 12 worlds lost. The Ashari had been a quiet, agricultural people, gardeners of moons, weavers of cloud silk. They had no warrior caste worth the name. They had stockpiles of grain and 10,000 poems about gentle rain. And now they had this. A young navigation officer cleared her throat. Captain, there is one option remaining on the projected courses. Show me. A new line lit on the chart. It bent away from every coalition trade lane, away from every neutral station, away from any system that had ever sent a ship back. It bent into a smudged, hatched region marked in 3 languages with the same warning. Forbidden Zone, do not enter, no recovery. Tavin made a sound in the back of his throat. Captain, that region. I know what it is. Every schoolchild in the civilized arms of the galaxy knew. The Forbidden Zone was where ships went to disappear. Probes that crossed its boundary stopped transmitting. The few captains who returned came back without their crews and without the will to speak of what they had seen. The Galactic Assembly had marked it interdicted 600 standards ago and posted automated buoys at every approach. The myths varied. A nest of soul-eating engines, a graveyard of a vanished elder race, a wound in physics where ships unstitched themselves into raw mathematics. What every story agreed on was this: nothing came out whole. Captain, we have civilians, children. We have civilians and children for half a cycle longer, Tavin. After that, Sarentek will have them, and you know what he does with children. Tavin's beak clicked once and went still. Veshara opened a fleet-wide channel. The act felt strange, as though she were stepping off a cliff with permission to choose where to land. She drew a breath that tasted of copper and recycled fear. All vessels, this is the Dawnward Tides. I am ordering a course change. Plot for the boundary of the interdicted zone, all speed. We will cross the warning buoys within 1 unit. The channel filled with cries, captains demanding clarification, a counselor invoking the migration treaties, a weeping engineer asking about her daughter. Veshara cut them off. I have watched our worlds burn. I have watched Sarentek's harvesters drag our young into cages. I have buried 12 cities and 3 siblings, and I will not bury another child to feed coalition law. If the Forbidden Zone consumes us, then we end as our own people, not as cattle. If it does not consume us, she paused, feathers settling, then we will have learned a useful thing. She closed the channel before anyone could argue. The fleet turned. Slow at first, the way a flock of grain birds turns above a field at dusk, and then with a unified shudder that ran through every reactor. Behind them, Sarentek's flagship adjusted course to match. The warning buoys grew on the forward display, rusted, ancient things, blinking the same red message in the same dead language they had blinked for 6 centuries. The first transport crossed the boundary. Veshara held her breath, waiting for the screams. The screams did not come. The Dawnward Tide slid past the rust-colored buoy and into the interdicted volume, and the only sound on the bridge was the soft tick of a coolant pump. No alarms, no subspace shear, no groaning of stressed hull plates. The instruments registered the same thin scatter of dust and the same gentle radiation gradient they had registered 10 units ago. Sensors, Vishara's voice felt loud in her own skull. Nominal, Captain, all systems stable, reading clean space. Clean, she turned her head. Define clean. The navigation officer's lower eyes were wide. Cleaner than the trade corridors, Captain. There is no debris, no drift wreckage. Background radiation is lower than baseline. The dust density is below standard for this galactic latitude. Tavin moved beside her. That is not possible. This volume should be a graveyard, 6 centuries of lost ships. And yet, Vishara stepped down from the command dais and walked to the main viewer. The screen showed darkness, distant pinprick stars, the slow tumble of the rear formation as the rest of her fleet finished crossing the boundary. Nothing flickered. Nothing devoured them. Long-range pulse, she ordered. Active scan. I want to know what lives in this graveyard. The pulse went out. The Ashari waited, 12 heartbeats, 20. The return came as a cascade. The display lit with structures, beacons working beacons, running an unfamiliar protocol on a clean, narrow frequency. Then satellite chains in geometric arrangements that no coalition engineer would have designed. Then ships. Vessels appeared on long-range scope in disciplined formations, 10 degrees off the ecliptic, holding station as though they had been waiting. They did not run hot the way coalition warships ran hot. Their engines whispered. Their hulls reflected almost no signal. The sensor operator had to enhance the return 3 times before silhouettes resolved. The silhouettes were nothing Vishara had seen. Long, dark, swept like blades laid flat. No visible weapon ports, no banners, no identifying transponder. They moved with the calm coordination of a single mind in many bodies. Captain, the communications officer's voice cracked. Incoming signal. On speaker. A voice filled the bridge. It spoke trade tongue, the lingua franca of the civilized arms, but with an accent that no living tongue produced. The vowels came too soft, the consonants too crisp, the rhythm shaped by a throat that had learned the language from books rather than mothers. Ashari Fleet, this is Watch Station 8. You are bleeding. Vishara's crest feathers rose. We see plasma venting from your tender. We see structural damage on 3 transports. We see civilian heat signatures consistent with overcrowding. You have crossed a boundary that no one crosses by accident. Are you crossing it by choice? Tavin gripped the rail. Captain, that is not Vortek. That is not anyone. Power weapons, the gunnery officer whispered. Vishara raised a hand. She kept her 4 eyes on the screen, where the silhouettes had not moved. This is Captain Vishara Talkareen of the Ashari Migration Fleet, she said, and chose her words the way a forager chose berries on a strange shore. We are pursued by Vortek forces under Warlord Sarentek. We entered this zone to escape capture and slaughter. We do not know who you are. We do not know if you mean us harm. We have nowhere else. The pause was small. The voice returned. Power down your weapons. Hold formation. We are coming to escort you. The pursuit fleet is still outside the boundary. They have hesitated. We will deal with them if they enter. Who are you? Vishara asked, because her throat would not let her ask anything else. Another pause, longer this time. The kind of pause a person made when they decided how much of a truth a stranger could carry. We are the ones who live here, the voice said. Power down, we will bring you home. The signal closed. On the long-range display, the dark ships began to move. They came forward with a precision that did not feel like aggression. They felt, Vishara realized with a strange tightening in her chest, like a parent walking toward a child who had fallen. Behind the Ashari fleet, the Vortek Armada had stopped at the buoy line, holding position. Sarentek had hesitated. For the first time in 6 months, Vishara wondered if he should have. A junior officer turned from his console, voice thin. Captain, we are picking up settlement signatures. inhabited worlds, many of them deep in the zone. Veshara stared at the dark, swept silhouettes approaching her bleeding fleet, and felt the floor of every certainty she had ever held tilt beneath her feet. The escort ships did not announce themselves further. They slid into formation around the Ashari fleet with the smooth competence of a maritime convoy, two ahead, two flanking, one trailing the wounded tender as though to catch it should it fall. They projected gentle tractor envelopes around the worst damaged transports and adjusted course at a pace the Ashari engines could match. Veshara watched them on her viewer for the better part of a cycle and learned more about them by what they did not do than by what they did. They did not scan her ships aggressively. They did not target paint. They did not transmit on coalition frequencies, which suggested either ignorance of those bands or a deliberate choice to avoid them. They communicated with each other in tight beam bursts, so brief her sensors recorded them only as flickers. They were patient, they were quiet, they were not afraid. Tavin came to stand beside her. "Captain, we are being taken somewhere." "I noticed. Should we be taken somewhere?" She did not answer at first. The fleet's medical reports were on her wrist console, 17 critical, 3 dozen with untreated radiation burns, 2 children born during the flight and now thin enough to count their bones through their down. The grain stores were empty. The fuel cells were at 14%. "Tavin," she said, "we have no fight left. We have no flight left. If they meant to take us as prizes, they had us the moment we crossed the buoys. They have not laid a finger on a single hull. Let us be taken somewhere." 6 cycles later, the somewhere appeared. It came over the horizon of a small yellow star, a station so large the eye refused to accept it as a single object. A ring. A vast ring, hundreds of units across, banded with green and blue and the soft gold of artificial sunlight bouncing off interior surfaces. Smaller rings nested inside it, spinning at different rates. Cities glittered along the inner band. Forests, lakes, the wandering threads of rivers that ran inside a structure rather than on a planet. That, the navigation officer breathed. That cannot be a habitat, that is a world. "Welcome to the hearth." The voice from Watch Station 8 had returned to the comms. "We have prepared dock space for your fleet. Medical teams are waiting. Your wounded will be triaged within a 10th cycle of arrival. Your dependents will be housed in environment match quarters. We have studied your physiology from your hull emissions, and we believe we can feed you safely. If we have erred, please tell us and we will correct." Veshara opened her beak and closed it again. When she found her voice, she asked, "Who built this?" A pause, then the speaker more softly, "We did." "We who?" The pause this time was the longest yet. When the voice returned, it had changed registers. Warmer, slower, the way a person speaks when they have decided to set down a heavy thing they have been carrying. "My name is Corin. I serve as ambassador to whoever the hearth meets. I would prefer to answer that question face to face, Captain. Will you come aboard?" Veshara took an honor guard of 6. Tavin protested. She overrode him with a look. The shuttle bay they were guided to was warm, gravity normal, the air slightly thicker than ship standard and rich with smells Veshara could not place. Growing things, baked grain, something like spice. The ramp lowered. At the bottom of the ramp stood a being she had no template for. 2 legs, 2 arms, upright. A head with a single pair of forward-facing eyes, dark and quiet. Skin a soft brown, hair cropped close. The body was strange in its solidity, dense, balanced, made of more muscle than its size suggested it should carry. The face was lined with what Veshara, after a moment, recognized as a smile. "Captain Talkarine." The voice was the same voice from the comms. "Welcome to the hearth, I am Corin." "You are," she struggled with trade tongue. "You are not in our records." "I know. Your kind, your species, we have no entry, there is no listing." "I know." Veshara's lower eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" Corin's smile did not falter, but something behind his eyes shifted, an old grief, recognized and put down again. "My people are called humans," he said. 6 centuries ago, your Galactic Assembly declared us extinct. They were a little premature. Corrin walked her through the hearth without ceremony, and that, more than the size of the place, undid Veshara's expectations. There were no guards posing in dress uniforms. There were no honor processions. There were children running across a green field on the far side of a viewing window, chasing a small animal she could not identify. There were old humans sitting under a wide tree, playing a board game with carved tokens. There were workers in plain coveralls hauling crates of fruit from a hydroponic terrace and arguing about pricing. It looked like a town with a sky overhead that was a curve of engineered light, and an engineered horizon that bent up rather than down, but a town. 6 centuries ago, Corrin said as they walked, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Assembly. They were not impressed. We came from a single world. We had no faster-than-light drive. We had wars in our recent past, contradictions in our laws, religions that disagreed with each other inside the same household. The Assembly's intake committee studied us for 11 of your standard years. They concluded that we were too unstable to integrate and too rapid in our development to ignore. They quarantined you. They built a wall of buoys around our home cluster and told the rest of the galaxy we had perished in our own folly. They sealed our subspace lanes. They corrupted our records in the Assembly archives. They made us myth. Corrin glanced at her. Inside the wall, we did not perish. We watched the wall, decided what it meant, and got to work. Work. Building, studying, listening. He stopped beside a clear panel that looked into a chamber filled with consoles and analysts. We watched every transmission that bled through the buoys. We reverse-engineered their architecture. Within a century, we could move through the wall undetected. Within 2, we had observers in your civilized arms. We have been watching the Coalition for 200 years, Captain. We watched what Sarentek did to the Veluri. We watched what he did to your homeworld. Veshara's crest feathers flattened against her skull. You watched. We watched. You did not act. Corrin met her eyes. Acting would have confirmed every fear that built the wall. We made a decision, not lightly, not unanimously, but as a species, that we would not become what they buried us for fearing. We would build. We would prepare. We would defend our home if it was breached. We would not avenge ourselves on a galaxy that had merely been afraid of us. My people are dead, Ambassador. 12 worlds, cities of poetry, children. I know. You watched. I know. The word was small, and it was not a defense. Veshara understood with a sudden sharp clarity that Corrin had said it many times to many faces over the years, and that he had no comfort to offer her because no comfort would survive the saying. She turned away from him and pressed her palm against the cool of the panel. Why help us then? Why now? Because you crossed the wall, Corrin said. The wall has rules. Anyone who crosses on their own power, not by force, not as conquest, but by their own choice and out of need, becomes our guest. The first guest since the wall went up. We did not expect you would be a Shari. We thought if any came, it would be one of the smaller Coalition border species, fleeing a tax revolt. We did not anticipate genocide. And Sarentek. Corrin's mouth thinned. Sarentek has not crossed yet. He is sitting at the buoy line, frightened, calculating. He may yet turn back. The deck shivered. It was a small movement, the kind a habitat made when a docking clamp engaged or a transport adjusted its orbit. But the lights in the corridor pulsed once, twice, in a pattern Veshara did not recognize and Corrin did. A voice came over the corridor speakers, calm and clipped. All watch elements, boundary contact. Vortek fleet has crossed the interdiction line at 4 points. Repeat. Vortek fleet has entered the zone. Corrin closed his eyes. When he opened them, the old grief had been put away again and something else stood in its place. Not anger, not grief. A kind of tired, awful certainty. He chose, he said. What happens now? Veshara asked. Corrin began walking toward the corridor's far end where a lift waited. He did not run. He did not raise his voice. He spoke without turning back. Now, he said, we stop watching. Admiral Tessa Vance was a small woman with gray at her temples, and a uniform so plain it could have been a custodian's coveralls, if not for the single bronze pin at her collar. She met Veshara in the command theater of the hearth with a handshake she had clearly practiced, and a nod that was not deferential and was not commanding. "Captain, I'm sorry your introduction to my people has to happen during a fight." "I am sorry it has to happen at all." Vance's mouth moved in something close to a smile. "Yes, Corin says you have questions. They'll have to wait. Would you care to watch?" The command theater was a wide dome with a projected sphere at its center. Inside the sphere, the Vortek incursion bloomed, red ship icons spreading in 4 prongs across the chart, 200 warships in the lead element, support craft and slaver holds behind. At the front, glowing brighter than the rest, was a single bloated icon labeled in trade tongue, Iron Maw of Sarentek. Around the red bloom, blue icons resolved. Human formations, fewer, far fewer. Veshara counted 43 before Vance touched a control and the icons began to move. The Vortek fleet was fast and brutal and confident, the confidence of a force that had not lost an engagement in 2 centuries. Sarentek's vanguard accelerated toward the nearest blue formation in a hammerhead wedge designed to crack opposing lines through sheer mass. The blue formation broke apart before contact. It did not flee. It scattered into a precise geometric pattern, every ship taking a vector that opened gaps in the wedge's predicted approach. The Vortek hammerhead crashed through where the blue formation should have been and found only empty space and a sudden, perfect cone of fire from 60 degrees behind. The first Vortek capital ship lost its engines in one volley. The second lost its bridge. The third found its targeting systems registering nothing. Every sensor return on the human ships had become a phantom, the real ships 10,000 kilometers off the reported positions. "Ghost frequencies," Vance murmured. "We've been refining them for 200 years. The Coalition encrypts its sensor handshakes with a protocol they haven't updated in 80. Our drones speak that protocol fluently. We tell their sensors what to see." Veshara watched a Vortek frigate fire on what it believed was a human destroyer and detonate one of its own escorts. "This is not war," she said. "This is correction." "It will be war soon enough." Vance's eyes did not leave the display. "Sarentek is bringing up his second wave." The second wave came. 300 more ships, the lower-tier conscripts shoved forward to absorb defensive fire. They came howling on every comm band, broadcasting threats in the Vortek war cant, boasts about flayings, about auction prices, about the price of grain in occupied Ashari cities. The human ships did not answer, they did not transmit, they moved. Hull-breaching drones, small as fists, poured from the human destroyers in clouds. The drones did not attack the warship's hulls. They attacked the warship's airlocks, identifying, by some method Veshara could not parse, the precise pressure seals and emergency hatches every Vortek vessel shared from a common manufacturer. The drones cut, slipped inside, and detonated in compartments where the slavers kept their cargo records. The Vortek warships did not lose their guns. They lost their crew's confidence. A capital ship's bridge officer surrendered to a human boarding party that arrived 7 minutes after the drones did, before his captain knew the bridge was compromised. The capital ship's transponder shifted from red to blue on the display. A second followed. A third. The Vortek wave began to fracture from within. In the center of it all, Iron Maw of Sarentek hung untouched. The human ships had not approached it. They had not fired on it. They had carved through every escort, every shield destroyer, every command relay, and left the warlord alone at the bottom of a widening empty sphere. Veshara stared. "Why not destroy him?" Vance turned her head a fraction. "Because he is going to talk to us. Watch." The display shifted. A new icon pulsed beside Iron Maw, an incoming transmission, on a channel no Vortek warlord had ever before been forced to open. A surrender request. Or something pretending to be one. The voice that filled the command theater was thick with rage, and a tremor Veshara had never heard in Sarentek's broadcasts before. Unknown defenders. This is Warlord Sarentek of the Vortek Coalition. I demand parley. I demand to know the identity of the species that has dared to fire on a ratified coalition fleet inside what is, by the laws of the Galactic Assembly, a quarantined region. I demand. He demands a great deal, Vance said. We will give him exactly one thing. She nodded to a technician. Send the file. The file the humans transmitted to Iron Maw of Sarentek was, by data volume, the largest single message ever sent on a coalition military band. It compressed 600 years of patient observation into a structured archive that any Vortek officer with basic clearance could open, and any Vortek officer with a conscience could not finish. Veshara was given a translated summary. She read it in a small side chamber off the command theater while the larger battle wound down beyond the dome. The archive contained complete movement records of Vortek slave fleets across 2 centuries, including manifest data the Coalition had falsified for its own internal audits. Recordings of Sarentek personally ordering the burning of 7 Veluri agricultural cities, with timestamps, witness identifications, and grid coordinates. Decrypted command channel transmissions in which Vortek admirals discussed which Ashari worlds would be allowed to surrender and which would be made examples. The names of every Ashari child sold into auction in the last 6 months, with the buyers, the prices, and the routing. The names of every Ashari child. Veshara set the reader down and did not pick it up again. She walked back into the command theater and found Quarren and Admiral Vance standing in front of the display. The blue icons had reformed into a slow, surrounding shell around Iron Maw of Sarentek. The red icons of the Vortek fleet had thinned to a scatter of damaged stragglers, most now broadcasting surrender on open channels. The voice of Sarentek had stopped broadcasting threats. It was now asking questions. Who are you? Identify yourselves. Identify your species. By what authority do you? This is Admiral Tessa Vance of the Human Defensive Command, Vance said into the open channel. Her voice did not rise. You will find our identity in the archive we sent you. Read it carefully, Warlord. You will find it well sourced. A pause, static, then, humans, the myth, the dead species. Not as dead as you were told. This, Sarentek's voice rasped. This is a violation of the interdiction. You have weaponized a quarantine. The Assembly will. The Assembly built the wall to keep us in, Warlord. The wall did not keep us in. It kept us patient. You crossed it. You brought a slave fleet into our home cluster in pursuit of children. The interdiction is no longer the Assembly's. It is ours. It has been ours for 400 years. You did not know because we did not tell you. You. Listen carefully now. We are transmitting this conversation, unedited, on every open coalition band. Your fleet officers are hearing it. Your council representatives are hearing it. The Veluri ambassador on Trade Hub 3 is hearing it. The archive we sent you is being transmitted to them as well, with attestations of authenticity from neutral analysts whom we have, for 200 years, also been quietly informing. The bridge of the command theater was silent. Veshara realized she had stopped breathing. You will not be killed today, Warlord, Vance continued. We do not want a martyr. You will surrender your flagship. You will surrender your command staff. You will be conveyed, alive and unharmed, to a neutral court, where you will be tried by a body composed of Veluri, Ashari, and 3 other species whose worlds you have burned. The evidence we have provided will be made available to that court. Your coalition may protest. Your coalition may threaten. The same archive, sent to your council, includes every internal corruption file the Vortek leadership has spent 80 years burying. They will not protest long. You think, Sarentek's voice was raw, you think the galaxy will accept this. You think a ghost species reaching out of a forbidden region will be welcomed. We do not require welcome, Vance said. We have lived without it. The galaxy will accept what we offer because the alternative is that we continue to refuse to engage, and the coalition continues to bleed at the edges as your subject species discover. Through the archives, we are now releasing system by system, exactly what their masters have been doing. A long pause. Surrender, Vance said, or do not. Either way, Iron Maw does not leave this zone. The pause stretched. In the side rooms of the command theater, Veshara could hear the soft chatter of techs receiving acknowledgement after acknowledgement from the coalition's secondary channels. The Vellery ambassador was, indeed, broadcasting outrage. The Trade Hub 3 Council was, indeed, calling an emergency session. The neutral analysts were, indeed, confirming the archive. The galaxy was learning all at once that the Forbidden Zone had been a mirror, and that everything they had feared was looking back. The icon of Iron Maw of Sarentek changed color at last, from red to a slow, grudging blue. Corrin let out a breath he might have been holding, since the buoys went up 6 centuries earlier. Vance looked at Veshara, and her face was tired, and her face was kind. "Captain," she said, "I think there is someone you would like to speak to. We have in the archive the manifest for every Ashari auction in the last 6 months. We have agents in 3 of the buying systems. If you give us names, we will begin extractions tonight." Veshara's beak opened. Her throat worked. She gave them names. The trial of Warlord Sarentek lasted 19 sessions and ended in a verdict no Vortek warlord had received in the Coalition's history, stripped of rank, of property, of citizenship, and remanded to a Vellery penal habitat where he would spend the remainder of his life cataloging the grain stores of the cities he had burned. The Coalition's outrage at the sentence lasted 4 days. The outrage ended when the second wave of human-released archives reached the populations of 9 Coalition core worlds, and a tide of internal demands forced the Council into reform talks that would consume the next 2 decades. The Forbidden Zone did not vanish from the charts. It changed names. Galactic Assembly cartographers, after some weeks of confused argument, settled on a new label. Human Home Cluster, Diplomatic Contact WLCOMED, Restricted Entry. The wall stayed. The buoys were repainted, and a different message blinked in a different language at every approach. The humans did not invite the galaxy in. They had spent 600 years learning that closed doors did not have to mean dead rooms, and they were not in a hurry to open all the doors at once. Ashari extraction operations, run jointly by human special teams and what remained of Veshara's fleet officers, recovered 3,000 children in the first month, 4,000 more in the second. By the 6th month, the auction houses of the Coalition had begun to close themselves out of a sudden, sharp absence of buyers who wished to be associated with the practice. The names Corrin had read off the manifests had, one by one, been published in their home systems. Their neighbors had reacted, as neighbors react when they learn what has been bought. 6 months after the battle in the zone, Veshara stood on a balcony on a green human world called by its inhabitants only the Second World, because they had not bothered to give it a more formal name in the centuries they had been terraforming it. The sky was blue. The blue surprised her every morning. The Ashari homeworld had been a soft violet under its yellow sun, and her eyes had spent her childhood adjusting to violet. Blue was strange. Blue was lovely. Blue was a thing she had not asked for and had been given. Corrin came to stand beside her. He had aged a little in 6 months. The lines around his eyes had deepened. He had been doing a great deal of speaking and a great deal of listening, and the work of being the face of a species that had chosen to stop hiding was a work that wore on a person. "Captain, Ambassador." They stood for a while without speaking. Below the balcony, a courtyard had been set aside for Ashari refugees, and in it, a dozen children played beneath a tree whose leaves were a green Veshara had not seen on her homeworld, and which they had come to love. A small Ashari girl named Myra ran past with a human child of about her size, both of them laughing in the wordless language children invent when they share no syllables. Myra had been on a Vortek auction manifest. Corin's people had found her in a holding pen on a moon called Drevet 11 days after the battle. She had been 3 when she was taken. She was 4 now. "We named the green wrong," Corin said after a while. "In our old languages, we had 100 words for it and none of them ever fit. We always thought we needed more words. Now I think we needed fewer." "My people have 1 word for it," Veshara said. "Will you tell me?" She told him. He repeated it badly with the wrong vowels. She corrected him. He repeated it again better. They laughed. The laugh was small and a little broken on her side because laughter is not a muscle one uses much when one is fleeing genocide, and the muscle had to be retrained. "What happens now?" she asked. Corin watched Myra and the human child wrestle over a striped ball. "Now," he said, "we live. We talk to a galaxy that did not want to know us. We tell our story carefully because the story can still frighten people who did not understand why we were hidden in the first place. We help the Ashari rebuild. We help the Velari rebuild. We help where help is wanted. We do not conquer. We do not avenge. We have had 600 years to grow into the species we wanted to be, and we will not throw that work away in our first decade out of the wall." And the Coalition. The Coalition is becoming something else because its subject species have learned what their council was. It will not be Coalition for much longer. What it becomes after that will be the galaxy's work, not ours. We will be there to listen. Veshara watched her people's children and watched human children and watched the sky that had been kept from her ancestors by myth, and felt a thing she had not felt in a long time. Not joy. Joy was too clean a word for what survivors carried. Something quieter, something tougher. The Forbidden, she understood at last, had never been a place of monsters. The Forbidden had been a place where a frightened galaxy had hidden the truth about itself. That a young species, told it was too dangerous to be trusted, had grown up behind the wall and chosen, of its own free will, to be a witness rather than a weapon. The wall had not killed them, the wall had taught them. And when the wall had been broken at last, it had not been broken by an army of vengeance pouring out. It had been broken by a single bleeding fleet of refugees pouring in, asking only for a place to land. Myra tripped, laughed, picked herself up, and chased the striped ball toward the tree. Veshara watched her go and laid her hand, very gently, on the rail of the balcony, and let the blue sky hold her for a moment longer. "Welcome home, Captain," Corin said. She did not answer him with words. She did not need to.